Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for November 2023. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs, and by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/roguewatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. This month's topic, as determined by the Patreon poll, is Baldur's Gate 3 versus Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Baldur's Gate 3 has proven hugely popular among everybody, D&D players and non-players alike. It's the biggest video game yet based on 5th edition, out of like 2, and makes a number of significant changes. Are any of Baldur's Gate 3's different rules and mechanics worth applying to our 5e tabletop adventures? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Brandon.
Hey there.
Jason.
Howdy.
And special guest, also known as Orc Jesus in our co-op Baldur's Gate campaign, Mr. Chris.
Orc Jesus himself.
Orc Jesus himself. Yeah, so Baldur's Gate 3 is based on D&D 5e, but for a lot of us who have experience playing 5e going into Baldur's Gate 3, I think there's a bit of a learning curve. You do have a lot of information already. You know how classes work. You know what races to expect. You know the fantasy world and kind of the monsters to expect. And that kind of meta knowledge, like, you know, going into, I don't think it's a spoiler to say the Underdark, for example. You might know what kind of foes you may come across, but the rules changes can be pretty significant within Baldur's Gate 3. And I do want to preface at the very start of this that we are going to avoid spoilers. There's not going to be any spoiler talk. There's no talk about specific story beats or plot points or characters in Baldur's Gate 3. We're going to stick purely to discussing the mechanics and really like the rules changes. And if any of them are, you know, interesting and perhaps they can be used in 5e as house rules. For example, I've got a bullet point list of... one thing. I remember the very first thing that confused us, by the way, when we played our co-op game was the fact that everybody rolls like a d4 for initiative instead of the d20 plus your dex bonus. So that results in a really weird simultaneous turn system that actually works great in the video game because suddenly you can coordinate, you can kind of swap characters around a little bit. If you are a single player, if you're a multiplayer, you can all be like, actually multiplayer, it's kind of terrible because you all end up getting in each other's faces. Sometimes you jump with your nice, that's too spoiler to even say what kind of creature this is, but a nice ally you have acquired only to have it turn into a cat at the last moment. Because of a wild magic has unfortunately gone off at the worst possible time, which is a unique thing that can't happen in the D&D 5e, at least in that literal simultaneous thing, because you would take turns. We'll still go around the room and say kind of maybe just big ideas, but there's going to be so much to discuss. We're just going to have to kind of go back and forth about all the changes. Brandon, let's start with you. I guess what is some of your biggest... maybe shocks or surprises or things that you like or really don't like that Baldur's Gate 3 changes from 5e?
So I think I'm going to start from how you would start a D&D game, and that's character creation. And I'm bummed that you don't get to roll and that it is only a point-buy system.
So I remember way back in the day playing an Eye of the Beholder game, which is from the early 90s on the PC. And that was, I believe, D&D maybe 2nd edition. I don't know. It said Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. That may be first. And you rolled for your stats. And even as a, whatever I was, 8 or something year old, I would just sit there and click the fucking roll button 1,000 times until you ended up with great stats.
Yep.
So
That's
I don't know
what I
what
did playing Icewind Dale and stuff too. Icewind Dale, I just go like, boop, boop,
that's true, yeah.
boop.
As a more recent
17, 16, 15, 14,
Yeah.
13, you're like, yes.
As a more recent example. So
Exactly.
I don't know what I think point buy is probably the best way to do it. Because I don't see how rolling necessarily works.
So for me, it's just I want the ability to do exactly that, right? Like
Okay,
that's all.
fair enough.
I don't want to make everything 20s
Yeah.
necessarily, but
Just
I
give
would
me the
like
option
for
to click the roll button.
for me to have a little bit of randomness. And if
Click
I
a
want to spend
rando
30
button.
minutes waiting for 318s, then so be it. But no, that's literally like one of the like probably 5 criticisms that I have about the game. And I would just start with the character creation part of not having any ability score rolls. I'm cool with the fact that I believe every race has the standard +2/+1 that's like a newer version of how you do character creation.
Yeah.
To the
Yeah,
point
so
where
you
I
don't
don't
have
think
to
they
worry.
even mention it in the races. They just give you +2/+1 just
Yep.
during character
That
creation
seems to be the thing
regardless.
they're going to do going forward. Like Tasha's kind of did that as like a variant, and now I think whatever the D&D next thing is called is just going to have that be a baseline. Like we're just getting rid of all those specific attribute racial ties and just decoupling that and saying, look, whatever you choose, do your +2/+1. Also,
Which to streamline it, I think makes sense. I
Yeah.
really do. And to make it a video game, I think it makes sense too.
you also don't get to roll hit points.
No, never.
Fixed hit points. I assume it's average. They just take the average. I haven't actually done the calculation of it.
I have not checked myself.
Average and
Average. I think it's average
Although-
plus con because I
Yeah.
have seen my con go up and down with the
Sure.
stats, but yeah.
Although I
so.
don't know if this is one of those things, and this is something I didn't really know, is that when you go to the higher tiers of difficulty, it just literally changes the numbers,
Mm.
Oh,
like the
Does-
hits
it
and all that
doesn't lower
stuff.
your
I had
health,
no
though,
idea
does it?
that was the case.
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah.
like, because I know there's abilities, like there's a couple of things you face very early who have a ranged attack that they don't if you play at the medium. So I thought it was just
Oh.
things they could do, or maybe the IA is better, but literally it apparently changes like ACs into hits, and I could be totally wrong.
yeah.
And
I
someone
mean,
in
that's the easiest
someone
way
in
to
comments is kind of like,
Yeah.
but
just tweak
so
the numbers.
anyway, I'm just wondering if the average HP would be different.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So that,
Well, I
that's
mean, the
know.
game's essentially being a DM and saying
Like,
I've
just saying, like, oh, these
overpowered my
enemies are harder
players
now.
and my players are too good. So now I have to increase the difficulty of my challenges.
yeah.
Yeah.
So character creation. Jason, what is on your mind as the biggest shocker going into Baldur's Gate?
The funny thing, you kind of hit on this with the initiative. So I didn't know about the initiative rolls until Brandon posted that thing with the D4 instead of D20.
Yeah.
And I was always confused I'm still confused how the
Does the
starting
game,
combat
does
works.
We
the
were
game ever
lost
actually
until-
tell you that? I don't
It
think
does
anyone
not.
has
I
ever
did not know
told
that.
me that.
Somebody
Yep.
told was it
Yeah.
you, Brandon? Somebody told us early in our very first session. We were like completely confused about how initiative worked in Baldur's Gate. Completely confused until somebody commented
They
like, "Yeah, you're actually rolling a D4, not a D20, and thus most entities are going to be grouped in these giant blocks and being able to go essentially simultaneously, but still technically, I guess,
Right.
enemies always kind of go one at a time, but."
Yeah.
So I didn't notice that, but what I noticed right away that drove me nuts, it still drives me nuts, and I realized why they didn't do it. But Celasta does do it, is you can't hold your action.
Yeah.
Oh
Mm.
gosh.
And that drives me
No
bonkers,
holding.
especially when I
Yeah.
started playing, because when I started playing, I could never get my melee guys into combat
Oh yeah. You spend your
because
first
of that
turn
reason,
getting
because
there.
you get
Yes.
stuck behind people and stuff.
Yeah.
And now I
Yeah.
know that you can jump like halfway across the screen, which is a completely different thing, which annoys me.
Jumping is, yeah.
I love it, but I also hate it because the
Yeah.
whole game is your guys like woohoo Supermaning like the whole
Superman.
way
Yeah.
Super
across.
Mario.
It's
Yeah.
super immersion breaking. Like I hate it.
Yeah.
I just love like Lae'zel like woohoo, but damn,
Like
that's the right thing.
anti-gravity turns on for a second. It's just, yep.
The held action thing was a major like learning curve for me.
That's a good
from
point. I'd
regular
forgotten.
D&D, because holding stuff in D&D and like I'm gonna wait to cast a spell until you get into range of this just doesn't exist unless you have the
Yeah.
exact same initiative.
Is it?
So, that's my
Dodge
thing.
is also not an action.
Dodge is also
Which
not
is
action.
also-
That
Which
one
I-
has bugged me before. where,
I
like,
think I don't understand why it's not part
Yeah,
of the game. If
yeah.
you choose to waste your whole action in dodging, that should be something.
Because they give
that's
you
part of it.
dash, they give you disengage. I don't know why they don't have dodge. Can the monk dodge? Anybody played a monk?
You can take patient defense.
It's mentioned in there in the thing that like you can't dodge, but X and X are still available or something. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
odd because there's been plenty of times where like a melee fighter will I won't be able to get them quite up to the fight, but they can get halfway there. So them just standing there, like, okay, I need you guys just to stand there and dodge now because you're just standing in the middle of the room ready to get hit by everybody.
As a side question is like I would, and I don't, maybe this has come up, but like the reasons for some of those big things, I would be curious to hear. I've seen lots of like YouTube shorts pop up with the developers and stuff, and they've explained things, but I haven't. I'd be curious to see like some of these big ones why they didn't implement them.
Well, I know one of the big ones was Dispel Magic, and they went back and forth a whole bunch on whether they were going to institute Dispel Magic, and they were like, "It's just going to break our entire game."
Yeah,
like,
I remember that
break
one.
the entire game.
Oh,
Because there's so much magic everywhere.
yeah. And so much.
There's a lot of bullshit.
And
there's a lot of bullshit magic as well.
Yeah.
Like, not bullshit as in like there's nothing you can do.
DM magic.
DM magic. Yeah. Where you're like, I'm gonna dispel magic, and DM's like, no.
This doesn't work on that for some reason.
Yeah, it doesn't work on that. Yeah. Is there a counter spell? Does that exist?
That does exist.
Okay, just because that one works just with people immediately casting the spell.
It's
you
as
can
a
use.
reaction. Yep. It just becomes a reaction. Like the game asks you if you want to use it or not. Yep.
And so far, I'd have to look through the spell list thing to see if there's changes. But so far, my experience is it just works. Like I haven't
really?
had a
You've never seen it fail?
I haven't had a situation where it's not worked.
Well, it auto
There's
works
no
against.
difficulty. There's no skill roll, or no. Normally,
Again,
if you
mileage
cast
may
it
vary.
3 versus
and
7 or something.
It could just be my experience, but so far it has just been like, do you want to cast it? Yes, I want to cast it. Bam, it's counterspelled.
Wow.
That would be a second complaint of mine, is that there's no obvious on-screen action that shows you all the rolls.
That's true.
Because I have been
I wish that was an option.
I have been counterspelled against, and I had to like literally go into the text
Go
line
to a little
and be like,
combat log thing.
Why the fuck didn't my spell work? Like I'm just like, I cast that spell. I know I did. I twin hasted my fighters.
I always like to see just the number.
Why are they not hasted?
Yeah, you want to see like the numbers, like especially if you cast like a big AOE and like an entangle, and there's like 4 people, and they're like, all right, 2 saved and 2 didn't. You're like, all right, let me see what everybody roll and look at. It's kind of a pain in the ass to like go over there and hover over it.
Yep.
Yeah, because
it is, and I wonder if it's because we're
does
all
all that, right?
players that we're used to looking for those numbers. We're used to seeing how it breaks down.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because most of us are VTT players. The other part about that whole thing is that it doesn't jump down; it'll stay. Which it's a mixed bag, right? You should be able to either lock the combat screen so that it doesn't move down, but that you have to push it down manually. It doesn't like.
What do you mean the
you have
combat
to be
screen?
keeping up with it? When I say combat screen, I mean the combat log, like
because it's
log
always
that keeps
like, is it disappearing or that's what happening, or it like blends?
Yeah.
So my 2 complaints is that what happens is it stays where you're looking, and for you to keep up with it, you have to click a button that says latest.
Okay.
And then it pushes it to the most current thing.
Yeah.
The second problem I've got is when you're playing multiplayer and everybody's holding turns, there's a thing that pops up that gives the people their movement bar, their action and bonus action icons, and it covers
the log. Yeah.
the log, right? That's not a mechanic about 5e.
Just the UI complaint.
Yeah, absolutely drives me nuts.
Chris, what stands out to you as being a major issue in Baldur's Gate? Not necessarily an issue, but something you're surprised about, or is a big change?
The biggest change I think is probably the most video gamey change, and I don't know if I compare. I don't know if it's comparable or not. Is just items, how items work. There's no attunement.
There's no attunement.
There's no. And unlike D&D, the tabletop game, where every magic item feels like a major accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we got a magic item. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3, the item economy is like, yeah, you're finding a new magic item like every 5 minutes.
It's not quite Diablo.
What the hell am I supposed to do with this thing now?
Yeah, exactly. So you just got like a backpack full of magic daggers.
Well, in that way,
all right, what do I do with?
It's like an Eric game, is what you're saying.
That's fair. That's fair. It's more like Baldur's Gate 2 than it is 5th edition in that way, is how I would argue.
Did they do that in Baldur's Gate 2? I don't
have it be a loot fest? Absolutely, yeah. Like Neverwinter Nights or Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Yeah, older editions of D&D. And I really only played them through video games. Had a lot more loot. A big chunk of your power was gearing up and getting all this loot. +1s, +2s, all the way up to like +5 swords by the end of it.
The other side of that is the loot's a lot less impactful, I think. A lot of them are like, your unarmed attacks do +1d4 damage. So it's like, that's not a giant magic item, right?
So would you rather get
tons of them?
Yeah, I guess would you rather get very few but huge items, or get just a bunch of items all the time and have to kind of sift through which ones are meaningful?
I think it just works better this way in a video game because
I think so, yeah.
You don't have to track it. Like if I had to track 8 different magic items, all doing a different effect, that would get overwhelming in a tabletop game. But if I just know like, oh, this does reverberation on my hat and my gloves also do something on reverberation, sure, let's see how that works. You know, I just put them on there. I don't really have to calculate that.
I'm impressed by how they really kind of expand what magic items can do. Like the whole, you talk about reverberation, they have like the lightning charges thing. They really get pretty complex to where, you generate heat. It's neat. But I think what you're saying, it's good for the video game. I don't think that would necessarily translate.
I don't think
it require a lot of like overhead and probably too much to track in the actual tabletop game. Especially like all these like temporary buffs buffs, holy shit. There are spells that have a duration that's designed for combat. They're clearly 1 minute spells and they last for 10 rounds. Things like haste, give me another good example. Does bless maybe work like that?
Bless.
I don't even.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the combat ones usually.
Yeah, combat buff. But then you've got all these other ones that like Chris, you would drink like a potion of Hill Giant strength.
Oh yeah.
Like it was just your fucking morning coffee.
That's right.
And then you'd be like, well, I just have the strength of a Hill Giant all fucking day now.
All day.
You know, like I'm just gonna make my build around this. Like that's not how
all day.
It's literally
it is all day.
Until
a lot of
long
spells
rest.
are.
Your long rest again.
Is it pretty much everything that just goes all day? It's like
most of
There's
it.
certain spells, but
Like
all elixirs last all day long.
But if you drink a different elixir, you
But if you drink a
lose
different
the
elixir, it
first
replaces
elixir.
yeah.
Now
elixirs
stuff
that give you another spell slot, and then there's the 5 or 6 spells that will actually last all day too.
Strider
and
basically everything that's over a minute long, like the stuff that's like this lasts an hour or something. There is no duration. It's just until your long rest happens.
Yeah.
Now, spells that have concentration will still have concentration, so you can still get knocked out of that, but the duration just lasts all the way to long, which that's pretty interesting. And going into 5e, it's like, oh, that'd be like one less thing we'd have to track.
Yeah.
Going into 5e is like, because everybody's asked like, well, we just did this. How long has it gone? You know, have we gone for an hour? And I have to try to calculate like real quickly, like, do I want them to have this buff or not? Versus like, hey, I've got this until I long rest again, or until you lose, concentration or something. And then the ones that aren't like the rituals, like I do my, in our co-op game, I do Long Strider, which I think that's the same spell in 5e. It just increases your movement,
more powerful
speed. Well, and it's ritual.
More powerful in this game.
It's ritual, and there's no concentration, so it's just an instant, like always on buff that I can turn on without any repercussions whatsoever. It takes up a spell memorization slot or whatever. Yeah, so I have to know that spell.
But what's different about Baldur's Gate is that you can, at any time, you can change your prepared spells as long as you're not in combat.
Without losing the effects of those spells, which is bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
So you could
wait. So you could just game the system?
Oh, I've done it with Gale. Like you can load them up with summon spells, summon all those creatures, and then know all those spells. D-list, whatever it's called.
No, it's D-no, I think.
D-no, and take different spells, and all your summons just stay there until they're dead.
I didn't realize that. That's crazy. Because
so you could cast Longstrider, and then you could change your prepared spell to something different.
Wow. I literally did not know. I didn't know that at all. I wouldn't have even assumed that, because that seems like it would be bullshit.
Yes. It is.
It is kind of bullshit.
Okay, well that I would not allow at my games. That seems crazy to where somebody's like, all right, let me do this, then do that. Because in older editions, I know that if you forgot the spell, then you would have to rest again to rememorize the spells if you change them around. Forgot is probably the word you were thinking of also, or unlearn.
Yeah.
But I like to.
I think it's okay, actually, like to change prepared spells generally, because I think we do that in a game anyway.
I think you know what? Forget. That's true. I say
as a player,
prepared spells. I don't
like,
even care.
I meant to make sure that I had this, and then you're like, hey, I forgot. Can we just say that like over the long rest that I switched this out?
Yeah,
I think this is where Eric and I admit to our shame that we basically cheat on prepared spells constantly, and just let the characters who have prepared spells use whatever the fuck they want to use.
I don't care. I don't care. I think that's one part of it's a holdover from older editions of D&D where you had to memorize certain spells, and literally it wasn't even spell slots. It was like, if I want to cast Melf's Acid Arrow twice, I have to memorize Melf's Acid Arrow twice. It's not like I can use spell slots to cast Malfsassadero. It's like literally those specifics. Like it was so very strict, and they've slowly gotten unstricter. Damn it,
Strict?
On a roll.
less restrictive, de-strict. Into 5th edition, but now there's that one little thing where it's like, oh, but you have to kind of choose every long rest. You have to now memorize your spells, and yeah, I just think that doesn't interest me at all. And we've had this argument before, and people will argue with me about it. It's like, oh, I like that aspect of like
I will argue with it
tactically-
about it.
Yeah, like
Because-
tactically
Yeah.
choosing spells.
Because I think every time I think D&D 5th Ed I think is pretty well balanced, and I think anytime you start ignoring one roll, someone else gets affected. Like, and when you take away all that prep stuff, what happens is wizards get less powerful. Because wizards are built for utility and that stuff, and like all the ritual, and as soon and like all the new Tasha's rules where everybody can just switch cantrips willy nilly. Like I think for wizards, it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It
I-
makes
I-
well, I think it would make
clerics and your
wizards.
druids.
I think it would make wizards.
If
more
I'm a wizard, I'm
powerful.
kind of like, I want something else now because like,
Yeah, that was my thing. Yeah. Yeah. Do we
I
think-
play wizards.
Do we
a lot,
think
so
that
that's
the BG3 method though is good for the tabletop? Like in the middle of the day, I could just change my prepared spell list.
fine.
I have a hard
If you
time
were
knowing
able to
the
have more
consequence.
spells,
Yeah.
I don't care about.
you'd be okay with it. But it hurts for clerics and stuff because clerics have like all these spells that never get picked.
Yeah.
Like they never choose like detect poison. Why would you detect? And,
Detect poison.
and then you get into a game where you can use it and you're like, I didn't think we would have poison this
Yeah.
Do
morning.
I want to
yeah.
summon a spiritual warhammer or detect poison?
That's exactly. Yeah.
My spiritual
That kind of
warhammer
stuff.
can also detect poison by smashing things. I don't know.
That would be the BG thing. That would be the BG3 thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
random attachment.
I feel like there's some interesting parts about how spells work in Baldur's Gate in the sense that with concentration spells, there's no good indication other than you looking at the spell, and you might be in the moment. 3 other things happened. You just played 2 other characters. You go back to the character that was concentrating on a spell,
Boy.
and you pick another concentration spell.
God,
and guess
so
what?
much- so
you just
many
lost.
times.
That's the
So
game's
many
fault.
times.
Yeah.
I don't
Fucking
know.
Shadowheart cannot keep a concentration spell going for her life. She
Also,
is constantly
Yeah, you throw
replacing them
guidance.
with a
Throw
new one.
guidance out there. Like, nope,
Throw
that's
guidance-
fucking
yeah,
concentration.
no, God.
That's the worst one.
also, I feel that the amount of concentration that's broken in Baldur's Gate 3 is significantly higher than any D&D 5e game I've ever played.
Thank you. I'm going insane how often I lose Barkskin in our co-op games where it's like
Yeah,
I fix and just
yeah.
give up on it because like
I
every
feel like it's
single
broken
thing.
of like, oh, this person's concentrating. I am 100% focusing on that till it's broken,
Yeah.
and then I'll switch targets.
Yeah.
The AI is also ridiculously good.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
They target concentration spells like crazy. I've noticed.
We've seen
It's a
like
vindictive,
big
cruel
old
DM.
burly frontline warriors like jump
yeah.
past the front line and just hammer on the spellcaster until they're dead. I mean, it's
Terrifyingly effective. It doesn't care about killing you either, which is also something that most
Right.
DMs would shy away from.
Totally.
yeah. Death is also a thing that we should talk about too, because the way BG3 handles it is very kind of video gamey, where they let it be a thing, like it's always like on the table and it happens, but they also make those scrolls of revivify
Yeah, like a get out of
pretty
jail.
plentiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they give you plenty of ways to get out of it.
You can cast it via distance.
Yes, at distance.
Does
And
it
you
have a
can-
1 minute time limit?
I don't think it does. I think it's
I mean,
don't
you
think so
can
either.
you can just go to Withers and say, "Yo,
or
Withers,
you can just go to Withers and pay 500.
yeah.
I forget
And you
how
can
much
and
it
you can
is.
long
It's
rest
not-
anywhere, so you can go to camp anywhere, I guess, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, go to Withers and talk about it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
So it's really like Death's there, but it's like a minor speed bump. It's not the major event that it is in the tabletop game.
Which
Which I guess
Super easy
makes
to stop
sense.
mid
And if it-
combat.
Yeah.
Mid combat, you can walk up and just like pet someone, and oh, they're fine.
They're fine.
Make it up.
Yeah, which I think it allows them to be deadlier in Baldur's Gate 3, a lot deadlier than we would be in 5e. Not only, I mean, all the balance changes in general make players, I think, more powerful, but also monsters a lot more powerful, and death is way more on the line in Baldur's Gate than most 5e, definitely our games, but certainly a lot of 5e games would be. And because, yeah, people can roll around with those scrolls, revivify. I'm really glad, I think, that they made that more convenient, because I did a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 2, I guess it would have been years ago at this point, but it wasn't like it was in, I don't know, 2014 or something. And I almost quit that game until sort of semi early on, you get a Rod of Resurrection, and it had like 8 or 9 charges on it. And that saved my sanity, because in that game, characters there's no death saves, by the way. You lose 0 hit points, you're fucking dead. And you had to just go and there's no fast travel. You have to just go back to the nearest town, talk to a priest, and revive them. And I'm like, man, nobody has time for this shit. You got to be kidding. It's a waste of my time, as like, I don't have a lot of time to play video games. This is a waste of time kind of thing. I hated that until I got that rod, and I was like, okay, I have this many times I can lose people without having to like, load the game, because, I didn't want to like save scum, but I was literally like so pissed off about having to get killed and having to do that. So I'm glad they made it. To me, that's like respecting my time. Yeah, it kind of makes the game easier. The scroll verifies especially. That's definitely a Divinity Original Sin thing too. Characters could die left and right and those scrolls. But, there's a big cost thing. Those are good magic items. They cost a bunch of money. Withers cost money. But I like the fact that you can revive people fairly quickly. But also, it's more dangerous. You can TPK pretty quick. And then if you TPK, it's just a straight up game over also.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that balance change, but that's not something I wouldn't necessarily throw out. Scrolls verify left and right, and have an NPC that can just revive you, obviously, in the regular D&D.
That is your biggest change between this and like a real game, is the fact that I could do that certain combat on the ground with something that has more than 4 legs, like 100 times and lose every time. You don't do that when you play.
No, you don't. Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Like the DM has to come up with something at the end.
Very different kind of gameplay where you're in combat like almost all the time when you're Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, and you can just reload if things go really south. Like it's you don't have to roll with what's happened. Yeah,
I remember playing Neverwinter Nights and looking up some kind of information about D&D at the time, because I never played 3rd edition, and the comparison was you gained 10% of the experience from an enemy as you would playing the tabletop game in Neverwinter Nights. 10%, because you were able to do combat and have fights way more often in the video game Neverwinter Nights than you would be in the tabletop game. And I thought that was like literally, I didn't know if it was 10 times as much, but literally 10% of the experience gained from an enemy. So yeah, I believe that's, you can be in combat a lot quicker. You can digitally, you can play any game a lot faster than you could the physical game. So to me, one of the biggest ones is that you can throw a healing potion to revive, to revive and like to heal people. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So much so that I believe we implemented that in our current D&D 5e game. So that's one of the best examples I could use. Like, oh, what a fun way of using potions. And with our current game as of right now, which is Call from the Deep, none of the in our actual tabletop game, nobody has like healing capabilities. So being able to huck healing potions at people,
yes, if you don't have a ranged healer, then
is pretty useful. I think I like how they did the bonus action economy on that. I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts on this, because like throwing a healing potion, throwing a healing potion is an action. Actually, yeah.
Throwing is an action.
Drinking a healing potion is a bonus action. Jumping is a bonus action. Shoving is a bonus action, which shove is a major thing in this game because of the amount of verticality.
Because, shove is a thing in the tabletop too, but that's an action. It's an attack action to shove somebody. So them making it a bonus action, I think that I'm not sure why they made that decision, but yeah.
They just give a lot more bonus action, and apparently sneak attack is a bonus action, which I didn't even know because I don't have any rogues or anything, but that's a bonus, which is why Raymond was so confused about, wait, you used your bonus action before. So the way they kind of did the action economy with bonus action, I thought was interesting. And then when you get revived from being in a downed state, I believe you don't have an action or a bonus action when you come out of it.
It's so annoying.
Way to turn.
Your character gets up and just get killed right away, and you
have like no.
You're constantly like, yay! Oh no, they don't get to do anything.
Yeah.
And you're still fucked.
I call it death tanking at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine if you did my lingering injuries shit with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it'd be a nightmare. Yeah, that's a rule that I guess because people are revived and they're like, well, this is the penalty for going down. But holy shit, I would not do that in our tabletop game. There's no way I would be like, all right, you revived and you can do nothing. It's like, well, you were just doing nothing when you were dying and unconscious. Like the fun part is like, I'm back up, I'm doing stuff. Now I could
They-
see like, okay, maybe if you're back up, you have disadvantage on thing, like you're a little bit debuffed
Sure,
from coming
yeah.
out of it. Would probably be the worst I do, but I don't.
I think that would be a better solution than
Yeah,
losing the
I don't
turn.
like
Yeah.
not having an action at all, especially if you're playing like multiplayer. You're really like, I only have the one character. I'm not doing shit if I go down.
You guys were talking about shove. Shove, it's extremely strong in this game because it is a bonus action. So it is both disengage and a
Yeah.
potential like free kill if you can push them off into a chasm. So it's one of those things where it changes, I think, your gameplay style a lot. Where you've got like the idea of what type of character it is, and then you're like, why would I hit him when I can just push him for free
Right,
and then do my action for something else instead?
There's
This
all
game treats it's
Push-
way more verticality.
wait.
Yes.
I was just
That's-
about to say
that's-
that.
That's one of the biggest changes.
That's
Yeah.
like
in
plus
terms
2
of
bonuses for
setup.
like shooting up and down.
Yeah, height advantage
Oh, yeah,
slash
yeah.
disadvantage
The
is a
height-
thing.
the height-
I also
yeah.
find it's very cramped. It's very vertical, but it's also way less horizontal because all your spells keep trying to cast like firebolt, and it's like no, out of range. I'm like, it's right there.
Yeah.
Because they only have 60-foot range, right?
Right.
It's super annoying. So it feels like a square rather than like a traditional D&D game, which is very flat.
I also
Yeah.
feel like Baldur's Gate didn't do the verticality as well as Solasta has. Solasta has
Solasta,
done
you
a
can fly.
fantastic job, and the fly in Baldur's Gate is
You cannot
rough.
fly.
It
That
is-
def-
it
that's
is-
definitely where you recognize like
flying.
they're literally their engine can't do fly.
You can't
Like, it
hover.
does-
You can't
yeah,
hover. That's the
yeah.
problem. Their flying is just jumping. I
Yeah.
think that's how Divinity worked also, and I assume this is
I mean, it's an engine
a
thing,
similar
so it's got to
engine,
be
yeah.
how Divinity worked. Yeah,
yeah. Whereas Solasta,
So-
like the world is a grid map that literally goes.
It's a box. It's a
up.
cube.
It-
yeah.
it's a
Okay.
cube. Yeah,
Yeah.
with like layers and each layer, and you can literally
It
like.
shows you the grid like the Matrix every time
Yeah,
you
like
like
the
use an ability. You can like draw the lines of where you go. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
better. One of the
That's
few
true.
things I think Plaza does a lot better.
It's extremely helpful. And it's too bad that there's not a good way to do it in BTT, because once you get into the third dimension in a tabletop game, at a table where maybe you have ways that you can prop things up on a paper towel holder or something,
Right.
maybe that's a solution.
Yeah.
But for a VTT, it's practically impossible to show
Yeah.
a third dimension.
Yeah, yeah.
It gets.
I've,
gets
been-
when you're dealing
I'm
with,
in
like,
roll
okay,
20
you
all the
guys are
time,
up-
and I can't figure it out.
Yeah,
Right.
when
I don't know how to do
like
roll
half
20,
of
I
you are
like-
up in like the beams of the building, and half of you are down below.
It's a
People below
nightmare.
can't see the people in the beams, and it's like, how do you even try to do that on a virtual tabletop?
Yeah, and we've tried it all different ways. We've tried having different map layers on Roll20 to where you move people around, and that gets tricky, or try to do the same layer and just constantly remind people, like, yep, that
Mhm.
person's 20 feet up there, like, you can't melee attack them, and which is
You got a
interesting that
token
Larian
set
just...
that has numbers, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
You can see it, but you have to keep going in and like changing the token number. And
Yeah. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, interrupted.
I mean, that's
Go ahead.
if the whole whatever the D&D Beyond VTT thing they're making, that would be a big thing. Is if you can make an engine like Solasta, like Baldur's Gate, like a 3D video game looking virtual tabletop, I think that would finally bring me out of the Roll21, because I mean, we're all video game fans. Like, if we can do that, but still probably have like the aesthetic, like do like minis and stuff instead of necessarily like animated, video game characters, I think would be a
Right.
cool touch. But if you can add that level of verticality, that would be huge, because I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a great example of how the entire game design can change if you can actually implement proper 3-dimension and all this verticality into the game. Like you said, suddenly ranges have shrunk down a lot, limited range, but you've got all these different height things you can do. Cover isn't really a thing, but obviously line of sight suddenly becomes a thing, more like a miniature, war game where you're kind of having to poke and see if you can actually hit people from there. It gets fascinating with the amount of verticality that game uses, even in areas like in our recent sessions where I didn't think there was going to be much verticality. It's like, oh my gosh, there is so much. It's absolutely crazy how much you can use there. Which is also probably why they implemented jumping as such a big deal in this game, because they quickly realized,
Right.
oh shit, we got to be able to have
We need to be able to get
everybody
Yeah.
get around as a bonus action, which just, Does jumping take, I think it takes part of your movement, but it feels like it still gives
does.
you some
It's a
extra
different-
movement if you use it, right?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
I definitely feel
Because
like
in
it does.
regular D&D,
Yeah.
it as much as you jump, it still takes up the same part.
Right,
of
so
your
you're never jumping unless you're literally having to jump across a chasm or jump up to reach somebody, because it's your same limited movement. But yeah, in Baldur's Gate, it's suddenly you activate that jump bonus action. Like, all right, now I've gained this much
It
distance.
gives you extra, but it's not just a straight
Great.
addition, because I've seen plenty of times where I run out of movement and I try to jump and I can't.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's doing, but it's doing something in between.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes.
You
quite
can only do it
Yes.
when you have so much movement left.
okay, but then
Which
you
is
can
why you kinda
jump
have to, like-
however far you can jump.
Yeah,
It's
so you
what
have to
it seems to
it's
be.
like a 2-step process. When you want to jump, you kind of go, I can go this far before I can jump.
It's like they calculate
Yeah.
like your running distance
Yeah.
or something.
It's
Right.
almost like, and I wonder if that's
Shows
it.
it in the token.
Maybe you have to go at least the 10 feet and then
Yeah.
you can get your full distance or something, because that's it. You can't use your full movement and then
Yep.
jump, but you can
Right.
use a good portion of your movement and then jump the full distance.
And it is
It's in
tied to
this
your
list.
strength.
It's in this list. Explains some.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
tied to your strength.
I need to put that in the show notes. There's a very easy 5e rule chain. It's a huge amount of things they changed, which going into
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3, especially in the early access, I assumed, because I had played, well, gosh, I think I'd played Slosta at that
Oh, I
time.
found it.
I think I played Slosta. Where I was like, okay, I know you can make a video game that's pretty fairly, what's the word? Loyal to, 5th edition rule sets. Like, it works for a video game. Slosta has other problems with, the story and the voice acting and the art and kind of everything else. But
That's part of the charm of that game, to be
It's-
fair.
It's like
I know.
9% jank.
it's a very, very tiny indie game, but man, they implement the 5e rules very, very well. And so going to Baldur's Gate 3, it's kind of a whiplash for people who know 5e, going, okay, it's the Forgotten Realms. I'm getting a lot of the, the character creation and stuff, and the way the strength decks, you recognize a lot of the stuff, and you get into the game and you're like, okay, what is this? I can, all these different changes basically is what makes it weird, but kind of interesting. One thing I really loved that Baldur's Gate 3 does, and specifically this happened in the, I don't want to get into spoiler stuff. Well, goblins exist. And they're obviously always a problem.
And you have to fight
And
goblins
you-
at some
you're
point
gonna
in the game.
you're gonna have to fight some goblins at some point. But in 5e, there's one basic goblin stat block, and then there's like a goblin boss, and then anything else is basically like bespoke to that adventure. It'll be like, oh, this is a goblin, whatever, war chief or shaman or assassin or something. But it would usually, in terms of the monster manual, you're basically got the one standard goblin that you see like 1,000 times. Whenever we battled a bunch of goblins in Baldur's Gate 3, they were all fucking different, and they all had player character abilities. There was like a goblin ranger who could summon animals. There was a goblin warlock who could hex you and Eldritch blast you. There was goblin clerics who could heal other goblins. I was blown away by how way more interesting a battle with a bunch of goblins was in Baldur's Gate 3 than it would be in D&D 5e. Now, on the other hand, I'm also thinking as a DM, oh my god, this
Screw that.
I'd be running an entire party. I'd be running an entire enemy party of abilities. I would not be able to do that.
Yep.
So that's something I think the video game takes advantage of and says, look, we can we can give all the enemies all these crazy cool abilities because there's no DM having to worry about what to work. That being said, I do wish there was some compromise. I think there's been a lot of complaints about the monster manual in 5th edition, how monsters are a little too dumbed down, a little too just limited in what they can do, and some compromise between those two would probably be my preference. But I was very impressed by the enemy design. Again, going into it thinking, all right, well, goblins, it's a basic stat block. They can bonus action, disengage, and hide, and that's about it, all they can do. And holy shit, those guys were doing all kinds of stuff to us.
What it does lead you to end up doing, though, which is this is another change, is it leads you to end up like examining the enemy and just like reading all their
That's
abilities
fascinating
and
that they
conditions.
I was about to point that out because I was watching your metagaming thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, instantly thought about what I was going to bring up, and now you brought it up for me.
That is
Very
true.
good. That's exactly what I was thinking about. The game tells you literally everything, and but you need it because Eric was right. You go up against a fight of 5 goblins, they all do something different.
Yeah.
Right.
And normally, what us as 5th Ed, we go in going like, oh, they have 7 hit points. They're going to do D8 plus 2.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Too much
13.
knowledge.
You go in knowing what we think. Well, we go in there and she's like, no, here's a warg. And you're like, what the
Yeah.
shit? So, totally different experience.
It
Which
is.
I like.
It
It
is.
is also for us.
It's interesting because I don't mind it. I do sometimes feel like it telling me what elements creatures are vulnerable and immune to
Yeah.
is maybe going a little step too far.
So
Yeah.
But then again, because all of that is just in the combat log, if the game wasn't telling me there, I'm not sure I would ever figure it out.
Right. There's no DM to say that hit didn't hit
exactly.
as hard as
No,
you
there's
expected
no
it to.
one to tell you like, hey,
Yep.
that didn't work, Chris. Like what you just
Yep.
tried did nothing, and you should not do that again.
So,
Yeah.
and Brandon, maybe you'll be able to back me up on this. In Solasta, I think you uncover
Experience the creature first.
right.
Like
So
you have to fight. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, well, yeah. No, I think we're on the same page. When you first battle a creature, you don't know anything about it, but then as you actually kill them, does it not unlock like information about them, like in some kind of bestiary or something?
And that's kind of fun, but I've played the original campaign and the DLC. What's interesting about the DLC is that it carries over the information if you used a previous save to make the next one. It carries over your bestiary or bestiary. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I've always
correctly.
said bestiary, even though it's technically
Yeah.
Bestiary,
there's
and
no
But I
bestiary.
think
I remember
it's
seeing a video
bestiary.
and they were like, "It's bestiary" because it's
Yeah,
based on
yeah.
Latin.
So,
okay.
so I'll try to use bestiary, but it's
I have
easier
lived
if I
my
say
whole
bestiary,
life
so-
saying
Yes,
bestiary, and
yes.
I'm not going to change.
Yeah, me too.
He's a paladin.
So the thing that's interesting, and I'm not sure which one I prefer, because the being able to examine is kind of like your house rules of being able to roll what I know about the character.
Yeah,
I just
but that is a
happen to
rule.
always roll well.
I don't automatically tell people these things. Although people also obviously can metagame that information if they want to. But yeah, we do have a rule where it's like, hey, you got to make a skill check. And then based on that skill check, I'll tell you that information. Baldur's Gate 3, as we've said, they just fucking give everything to you. You just right click and examine, and they say, now they don't tell you their exact attacks or
No,
spells,
don't.
but they
don't
do
give
tell
attacks
you
or spells, yeah.
they do tell you all of their stats. So there was a one fight we fought against we didn't know what this character was, and we saw that they had like an 18 intelligence. So I'm like, oh, well, that's a wizard. So you could kind of infer things based on that. And they do tell you the resistances, which is huge, because automatically you can say, oh, I can exploit this, not use this, etc.
It does
But
also
they
show
also-
you features. Like,
features. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
you-
Like if they have dark
aura,
vision or
yeah.
certain traits. Yeah, I guess the traits
Outside of that, and I love this, but it is again metagaming for the player. It tells you what your percentage chance of success is on spells.
because
And
it gives
I
you their
find that
ace.
crucial, because I would never fucking try, my wisdom save if I see that it's an 18% chance
Yeah.
to succeed.
But so that's because they tell you the armor class.
Yes.
And because you have these stats, I believe you can infer the saves. I don't bake in
they,
like
they
their
straight up
proficient.
tell you.
Oh,
Like
do they?
if you select a spell,
Yes.
like I don't know, like whole
and mouse
person,
over the creature.
and mouse over the creature, it tells you like 20%, 80%.
Well, I know
like
that,
you-
but I'm trying to like say
Oh.
because you would know that information already based on examining the
Oh,
creature.
yeah,
But I don't think they actually
basically.
tell you the specific saves. But yeah, you could reverse engineer it based on your
Based on the
DC and their
Yeah.
chance. Yeah, and technically, I mean, you could, maybe you could configure Roll20 to work like that. It's like, you could literally have the percentage pop up, but the DM in 5e is not telling you the AC and not
Right,
telling you the saves.
right,
You have to
yeah.
like spend that one thing. Now we roll publicly in 5e, so at least on spell saves, you only need to do one, and then you can just mouse
And then
over
you
and be
know,
like,
yeah.
oh shit, this guy's got a +4 to wisdom saves. Well, I know
Yeah.
not to target that. That's something that because we use public rolls. But when you attack and I say you miss, you don't necessarily know what the AC is until a couple rounds into it if you manage to hit that.
Yeah.
So
So is that an improvement or is it an impediment? If you did it in a D&D tabletop game and you gave all the information,
gave all the information.
is that a bad process? Does that take away from the game experience? I'm not sure I know the answer to that
I
myself.
just thought about the last session. I was kind of like I was getting them to roll spell saves against saving throws against spells. I was like, is it more fun if you as a player can know what the DC of something is before you roll it?
Because
Right,
just have the
right.
DMs that nope, you failed.
That's right then. You know.
You have
before
no idea how
anybody
much
else
you
knows.
failed or anything.
And
So I don't know.
it
I've never
prevent-
in the past I've not done it that way. But I'm starting to think I like giving
seen
out the
both,
DC.
Yeah, I've seen both situations. One where like a player rolls something, everybody knows it's a success, and everybody's happy all at once. I've also seen Eric be a jackass to us sometimes, and we
Start
roll an
laughing.
attack. We roll an attack roll, and Eric goes with a 16. That's gonna miss. We're like, He like draws it out, like we're all hanging on his words, and
Yeah.
that's kind of fun too. Like you're like really leaning in, like what is the DM gonna say? Did that work? Did that not work?
It's an
No doubt
interesting argument to have, I think, for sure. I don't
How many
know.
players maybe? Like, what do your players want?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Use a
right?
player to play. I think some of my players really like the numbers,
Yeah.
and some of them are more about the RP stuff. And that's
Right.
It becomes a different
That's the thing
kind of
you
game.
find
Like
out.
I really appreciate
Yeah.
what was that game, Into the Breach? And there's probably other games like that where it's a turn-based strategy game, but it tells you all the information about what's going to happen in the next turn. It's like, hey, this thing's going to attack this thing's going to move here, this thing's going to attack that. It's just a chess game, but it literally tells you exactly what the enemy's even going to do in that game. And then it's more of a puzzle. It's still fun. It's just a different kind of strategy game versus if you're playing like an RPG or something. You're just like, okay, I have no idea what the enemy's going to do. I know what they're capable of in Baldur's Gate 3, but maybe not even necessarily what they're capable of, but I know what their defenses are, I guess, in Baldur's Gate 3. I kind of like, honestly, I think I'd prefer Solasta's system where,
Finding out.
yeah, the first time you face a creature, I don't think you should know anything about it. Maybe you could borrow our house rules and say, you know, and the game does this all the time, which I love. It's like automatically makes like perception checks and survival checks whenever you just walk around and this happen. Do that whenever a first enemy appears. Roll nature, arcana, religion, whatever, depending on what the creature is, and then that reveals information right off the bat. And then as you defeat those monsters, you unlock new information about that monster until you've done a certain amount, however much you need to after a lot of playtesting. Then, which is lost, then you have learned all the information about that monster, all of its weakness, because that would be the metagaming knowledge you would learn from facing that monster again. So I as much as it benefits the player, I don't think I like having all of that information immediately in Baldur's Gate 3. I guess as a balance mechanic, it allows them to be even more stronger and deadlier with their monsters because they can't give that as an excuse, to the combat and say, well, you guys didn't know what was happening, so we got to maybe pull back or do something. Like, no, we're going to have our monsters be incredibly strong compared to the players, and they're going to be with a devious AI that's out to fucking murder you, and you have no excuse because you know all what you may not know what they're capable of offensively, but you know exactly what their defensive stats are. So it creates a different balance mechanic.
I think it does. Yeah.
I don't think I like having all of that defensive knowledge, and it feels weird because we just sit there and right click and examine, and you see it from my point of view when you're watching our games. I absolutely do that on my games. I'm sitting there going, okay, it's part of the routine. I'm just going to examine this creature and rattle off all of its things, and it's, oh shit, this guy's level 5, and this it's a different experience, and I don't think I like it compared to... And I think Solasta actually does a pretty good compromise where you have to like learn all that information and then it unlocks it in some kind of a journal type
I'll say
log.
There is...
Solasta. Sorry, you go ahead.
I was going to say that there is like... It allows the game to do things that probably wouldn't work very well in the type of tabletop, but as a video game it works. There's I'm not going to give spoilers. There's a creature that you fight in Baldur's Gate 3 that in one condition has a certain set of immunities, a lot of immunities. And in a different condition has like one vulnerability and a different set of immunities. That fight in a tabletop setting with players trying things and just failing and trying and failing and trying and failing, that would be a fucking nightmare. Yeah. But because we can all see it, we can just see what he's in this condition, so he's this. He's in this condition, so he's this. We can. It was a puzzle, like you said. Like it just becomes more of a strategic challenge than a like role play thing. So it's just a difference, I think, at that point.
What I was gonna say is that I don't know how often in Baldur's Gate 3 you fight the same monster over and over again.
Not often.
I don't know how valuable it is for you to kind of like. I learned a bunch about like Goblin version 12.
Yeah,
because you're not. I haven't.
Not a lot. I guess that's.
I barely got into Act 2, and the game stressed me out too much. I haven't played the last few weeks. But so I'm kind of if you're gonna play that same thing again later, if it's much help.
No, that's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. I have not played.
Solasta seems to rotate.
Yes,
its
Solasta has
things
a
that you like,
much,
especially from random encounters.
a much more limited palette of monsters to use from. Probably is just a budget thing. I think in the end, because I think both games
Probably
actually go
also
to the
the
same
SRD.
level.
Mm.
That's
Yes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
you're right. They don't actually have the like
Probably
the
the
Forgotten
SRD
Realms
too.
license and stuff, do they? So you're not going to see beholders and shit. But that's true though. I think Larian just got really excited and wanted to use like as many monsters as
Everything,
possible.
yeah.
Yeah, so the Underdark is like a fucking when you go to a restaurant and you order the appetizer that's got a little bit of everything sampler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, just fucking let me see everything. And,
Yeah.
and you're right. In that case, if you only fight a monster once or twice ever, then that system's probably not going to work out as much. It's weird to think, even though the game is obviously pretty combat heavy, it's no two combat situations or encounters seem to be the same due to enemy type
That's
or
very true.
situation or hazards or whatever else.
Yep.
So I've got another topic of like, is it better or is it worse? Spells, when you cast a spell, if you cast a spell, excuse me, if you cast a cantrip, there's no limit if you've like hasted yourself on what you cast again. I'm not saying this correctly. There's
They
no
get rid of the one spell
get
per
you.
turn.
one
limitation.
spell, and then you can cast a
Yeah.
cantrip for action bonus action. If you
Yeah.
have an action spell, you can cast the action spell,
And
and
the
then
bonus
you can
action
cast
spell.
a bonus action spell too.
In this game, you can straight up cast guardian or what's it called? Spiritual weapon with a bonus action, and then do a full on another spell with your regular action, and it's fine.
Yes.
Now, Jason, as somebody who plays a lot of
Which
wizards,
you can do anyway.
What do
Which you can do anyway if you're a cleric. But
Oh, really?
yeah, what are you going to say?
I was gonna say, as somebody who plays a lot of wizards and probably has this come
Oh,
up
yeah.
quite a bit. What do you think about that balance change for Baldur's Gate?
Okay, so my problem with this, and this is like this is a problem I think I have with the game, but I haven't got far enough in the game for it to be an issue, is that the further you get into it, the more it becomes like less about kind of the story and like RP kind of stuff, as it becomes like, how can I tweak the shit out of my things to make them to work to go to be ridiculous level? That makes sense, because I hear
Yeah.
You can play it that way. You can
Brandon was
absolutely
talking
play it
about
that
like
way, yeah.
casting spells, and I'm just hearing all the exploits of like sorcerers casting 4 fireballs in a round. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to spend my whole game
Right.
time trying to tweak my game
Yeah,
so I can do that. I'm here to experience story and kind of have fun,
yeah.
not max min. Max min? That's not the way you say it.
Min max, yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. And I mean, I've read things too, and I have to like sort of stop myself because like earlier I mentioned like twin haste. I read somewhere that like, oh yeah, you can break the game by just twin hasting your blah blah blah, and do this and that, and then suddenly your warriors are doing dozens of attacks or whatever. And I have to sort of stop myself from like doing that every time. Like, well, let me try.
Just because you want to,
like just because it works
Just 'cause you
doesn't make it
can, doesn't mean you
interesting.
should.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. There's a couple times that I've been pretty satisfied with the way circumstance worked out.
I
You're
mean,
like, okay, that was pretty badass. I won't do that every time, but that was
like I
really
said,
cool.
it's a devious DM. Sometimes you got to pull out all the tricks.
I think it's fun when you pull it off and you figure it out. I don't want to, and that's part of my problem with the game, is I don't want to spend my whole time playing the game trying to tweak numbers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's my biggest issue. And I find like, and we brought up items earlier on, like I find items of just like combining items and just stacking them has made it more about the items than it has been about my character's abilities.
Mm.
That's true.
Everybody
that
can
is a
use
different
all
change.
this crazy stuff. It's like my characters become less like I'm a wizard and I'm a this. They just become all like things I can throw stuff with.
So,
or like
they
stacks
can all
of
cast
abilities
scrolls,
from, yeah,
or
yeah.
like I'll just put all my cool magic items on this guy, so he does like D8 plus D4 plus 8 plus D4 plus 8 plus D4 plus 8 plus D4.
Yeah.
Which even when you get to like level 12 in regular 5e, it's not nearly that complicated.
Yeah.
Right? It's just your cantrips do 3 times as many dice.
Right, yeah,
Or-
exactly.
It's more
that's it,
complicated. If you ever run a 12th level campaign, you know it's more complicated. But it's not like
It's not, yeah.
it's not management fest, which I feel Baldur's Gate gets to be once you get
When
level
and this is as far as I am right now in the game. When I got at the end of Act 2, got to the beginning of Act 3, put in a new set of characters because I wanted to go into Act 3 with different NPCs. I I swear to God, 90 minutes of game time doing
believe
nothing
it.
but emptying inventories, picking all the items that I had gathered through the rest of the game, being like, oh, that rapier will work good on a stair. That had to work good on, doing what you're talking about, the management stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's very video gamey. It's not something I'd want in my tabletop game for sure. Like, we don't want to spend 90 minutes like,
Sifting through
Right.
dozens of magic items for the optimal build. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess my ultimate question is, because I've thought about like that weird restriction to go back to the bonus action spell versus the action spell. That always felt like a weird restriction for spellcasters, and I even thought about lifting that, but then I just have that worry of like, oh, is there some exploit out there, or would people be able to take advantage of being able to unleash their bonus action and action, even though you're still burning through spell slots more often? I guess it depends on how often you're resting, which is always the biggest.
How often you're resting and how often you're fighting? Because I feel like
often you're resting versus fighting, which is always the biggest balance thing in all of D&D 5e is the rests, right? Your rest cadence and your pacing of Adventuring Day is going to depict all of your balances, because the whole game is still based on a war of attrition in terms of you losing your resources. Neither D&D or Solasta, in my opinion, really solve this, by the way, the whole resting thing. Solasta has the usual in terms of short rest, works exactly like it does in 5e. You have to, you roll hit dice and all that, and it's fun to be able to sit there and roll them. And then long rests, you have to use ration kits, which weigh a lot and are a pain in the ass. But then after you get to like 3rd level, there's multiple classes who can just create food. And I mean, there's a whole ration system where you can forage, and it just doesn't ever seem like it's a big deal. Like early game was very interesting. It was like, oh shit, I'm really like limited on my rests. But then very quickly you kind of out level that to where it really doesn't matter. Baldur's Gate, even more so. They're like, oh yeah, you've got to have food to long rest, but there's food fucking everywhere. To where that one point where I looked, I was like, oh yeah, we have 1,000 units of food. Stop picking up food. Like it just does not matter. To where it's like, why did you even like? Why did you even have this as a thing? Like so. And a short rest is very different in Baldur's Gate 3. They limit you, which is odd they did this. They limit you to 2 short rests per day, but per day is as much as you fucking want it to be.
Yeah.
So a day, it's rest, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a day.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but like,
no,
yes, I get.
Yeah.
So
you can literally. There have been points where I've literally done 1 fight, short rest, 1 fight, short rest, 1 fight, long rest.
Yeah.
Like you can do that. Like that,
now,
there's nothing stopping you.
Well, that being said, I have heard, and I haven't clicked on these things because they're spoilers, but I have heard of people report that there are time-sensitive quests out there, which is always the thing that people say, well, this is how you solve this issue by having it be time-sensitive. Well, it's like, well, I don't want to fucking do that as a DM. I don't want to have to throw random encounters to the party in the middle of their long rest, or have to be like, oh, well, now we don't get to do the cool thing I planned because you guys long rested, so we're gonna have a worse game now. Like that's not a good solution. The solution is to completely redesign D&D to not be based on the arbitrary rest that everybody argues about. When do we rest and how does this work? Like the solution to that is too far reaching for Baldur's Gate to handle. But I at least think Solasta started out with an interesting system where it's like, hey, you have limited ration kits. And you have to carry those, and those are used. It's like a finite system, but then it kind of breaks it as you level up. And then Baldur's Gate, they just kind of don't give a shit. Pillars of Eternity, the very first game, had a limited rest system where it's like it was still based on long rest, but you could only carry, and actually depending on difficulty, I think it was like 3 by default, like 3 camping supply kits. So whenever you went out, you could only ever like long rest like 3 times. Now the problem is you could also loot these somewhere as loot things as like a whole long rest. But at least that one, it was like, okay, I'm limited when I go out and leave town. I can only click that long rest button so many times. So that makes me manage my resources a little more. Baldur's Gate, they really just don't give a shit, which is why I liked Divinity's system a lot, where it's like, you know what, fuck resting. Everything is just cooldowns. It's an MMO, basically. It's way more video game. It's just, you can use all your abilities all the time, but you have an action point system, and you've got cooldowns, and all of that just works better. I guess this is me just complaining about D&D system in general.
That would be just a complete redesign of
it is. It's no longer D&D.
All the spells would no longer work the way they do work now.
Correct. You would have to like redesign everything because
Yeah,
I think I'm ranting too much about D&D in general, but it's the problem is I want to see somebody solve the resting issue. I think it has to be restricted. I mean, hell, in our tabletop game, I already, as of was it Tomb or Rhyme, where I was like, hey, you know what? I think it was Tomb. You no longer auto long rest every time you travel.
Yeah,
right.
When traveling, right.
So that makes traveling suddenly is restrictive in that way, and you have to worry about your resources and manage all these random encounters if you were in like this big overland dungeon. Now, once you reach all these different places, then those are safe spaces you can long rest in. And I don't think Baldur's Gate 3 also ever even restricts where you can long rest.
No,
You could be in the middle.
Well,
you can't be next to enemies, obviously, but
you can be in the middle of like a certain camp as full of a certain little green things.
Yeah.
And you can just be like, yeah,
click that
I'm
long rest
85
button.
feet from something, and we just got this
Exactly.
cavern we can spend 8 hours in.
It's a
There
little.
will be places that the game restricts
That's
your
true.
ability
There
to go
are-
to camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I
have
haven't
not
found
seen
one
those
yet.
yet.
Yeah.
But there is some. Okay.
I
There's
did
one
want to
place.
say that,
There's
like,
one
the
place in
thing
Act 2 that legit felt like a war of attrition to me. We're like, okay, I have to keep pressing forward,
Okay.
and I'm out of short rest,
Yeah.
and I can't long rest, so I'm
Okay.
literally watching. But that was like a
specific
one or two time
situation.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very obvious when that situation comes up that you can't
Yeah.
go to camp. Like it's unmistakable. What I
don't
find
have
interesting
access.
about that scenario is like I've tried to go as long as I possibly can
Yeah.
to keep my daily like hill giant strength stuff.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what I end up doing is cheesing it and getting all my party together and throwing down healing potions in the middle of everybody. so that I've got my long rest extended or my short rest extended.
Yeah.
And the thing is like I was concerned that exactly that I was going to be missing stuff. Well, what I ended up doing was missing some of my long rest,
The long rest stuff. Yeah.
like the sequences that happened during
That's
long
what I was
rest.
going to bring up. I was going to bring up is this is the first game I've seen that ties progress, because it's so narrative based with your party in a way that I've never seen. But I haven't played the earlier ones.
One
What
and
are the
two?
two before this?
Yeah.
No, not Baldur's Gate. Larian's previous. games.
Divinity games.
Oh,
yeah.
Divinities. Yeah.
I haven't played those
Eternity.
because they're not 5th ed based, so I got into them. I was like, oh shit, fuck that. I don't understand what's going on.
Okay.
But this game is like the movement of the narrative is tied to when you long rest.
Yeah.
So I'm never sure if I want to take long rests because I want to go too fast, because I kind of want things to go slow, or if the game wants you to go real fast. And constantly be taking long rests, because you're only walking like 180 meters,
Right.
space to space, but the game treats it as if you've been walking for days, right? Like,
Yep.
you play the game for 3 hours, and like Gale is like, oh, we've been traveling for years, and you're just like, no.
Yeah. It's not that big of an area.
That's a different thing from with that, where you're kind of massaging, the DM is massaging narrative stuff.
Yes.
In whenever he wants, whereas this game is like, nope, it's happening on the 6th night. You are going to get bit by someone.
That is something else about the game that I really appreciate, and I can't talk about it too much, but as a DM, I play sometimes with the illusion of choice. And I don't mean to make that sound negative, but it's like, I don't care what your choice is, right? Like, I don't care what choice you make. The choice is going to end up kind of leading us toward this thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like Baldur's Gate does a great job of making me
you
feel
choose
like
whatever you want. You're still going to end up in the pirate cave.
the choice that I'm making is important. And then it's like, well, it is important, but it just changes it just enough to where it's personalized for me now. Right. The experience is still predominantly, the thing, but it's personalized. I get to have a story that nobody else has had, which is the same thing in a game that's tabletop. Like my players and me, we have a game unique to us, even though you guys have played, Rime of the Frost Maiden. If I run Rime of the Frost Maiden, we'll have similarities, but it's going to be different enough that it'll be a totally different experience.
Yeah.
I think they encapsulated that.
I like playing major
well.
modules a lot. Oh yeah, I was going to say BG3A does that better than any game I've ever played. The ways you can play the game and branching narratives and stuff just blows my mind, and then it redirects you to their same places. Amazing.
Right? Yeah.
But I was also going to say that I really like playing the big bossy modules, because then I can go watch Eric's game.
Yes. Yep.
Get a sort of shared but different experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like watching Avatar. You can go talk about Avatar with other people that have seen it. It's a shared communal experience. Whereas if I go play like some random Kobold Press module, 6 people have played it.
Right.
It's not
right.
the same.
It's
not the same vibe as the DM to be like chatting about it.
Exactly.
I think.
think we have gotten to all the different. I mean, there's a lot we can talk about Baldur's Gate 3. We've been chatting for an hour already. Yeah. One more
I
thing.
do have one more. I do have one more. That's a big one.
Okay, it's a
all
big one.
20s are successes. All ones are failures, no matter what.
Not even just combat rolls, but also skill checks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just a failure.
That's one of those things where I think people forget that that's not an official rule, and so many people have that baked in as you rolled a nat 20, so of course you succeed. And technically it's only attack rolls that actually.
The only reason they get away with this is because
fix that. I think
is because you don't get to say I seduced the king to give up the kingdom. Sort of, you don't get to say that in Baldur's Gate 3. So they can do auto successes because they have planned for success in every.
That's a good point. Yeah, they have planned.
They
like
only
here's where you
let
make
you do things that you can do.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think a part of that is also like it's in to the masses. Because the masses of watching like Critical Role, and it's like the nat 20 is like the thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the thing where everybody like has an orgasm. Woo!
Right,
Like
Oh,
so it's like the way the player can beat the system.
Yeah.
I did think of something
random, right?
I wanted to bring up the way inspiration works in Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, that was the other thing.
So
it's better than the game. It
is
straight
100%.
Right? Like
100%. I agree completely.
So we're
background.
So yeah, in Baldur's Gate 3, inspiration is tied directly to your background. So certain things in the game is already coded to be like, this is relevant to the acolyte, this is relevant to the charlatan, this is relevant to the criminal, the military background, soldier, whatever is all in the game. And then if you successfully do the thing, then it rewards that player inspiration, and mainly because this is designed as a single player game first, I guess, the inspiration goes in a pool where anybody in the party can actually use that to re-roll, but you can also only bank so much inspiration. It's like 4 or 5, I think.
4, I think.
Okay, you can only bank so much. That makes sense because 4, you only have each one inspiration. Yeah, and then you get like a little bit of experience or something. You're saying you like that more than 5e's? Just like it's up to the DM completely.
That I like more than 5e. I love the use of the backgrounds as a source of inspiration. I think that is brilliant, and it's solving a problem that 5e has had where they don't know what the fuck they're doing with their backgrounds, and they just sort of sit there and don't do anything.
Yeah.
So saying like,
to be fair, it is tied to backgrounds and fit that though. It's just up to the DM to know.
The DM to know that. Yeah,
it's up to the DM to know what every character's flaw is, and no DM knows what the character's
right. Exactly.
I don't think a lot of players know what they are because players only choose them when they first.
Yeah, you forget about a lot of that stuff.
The list is not always the one that you think your character would have.
Exactly. Yeah, and then you get to role playing them, and like they're not actually acting like what I wrote down. So let's just ignore that.
Baldur's Gate knows what they are. It just go like ding, like,
and it knows what the successes are. It knows that you're, a folk hero. So of course, saving all the kids from the marauding monsters would be, your bally.
So I imagine in like coded as rules, it would be like you would have like a bullet points of examples. You'd be like, all right, here's your background. Here's the bullet point list of examples that would give your character inspiration. Like folk hero would be like you are specifically like saving people. You're rescuing somebody.
You risk
from
yourself to do.
You're like a Captain America style. Like you would even like sacrifice yourself to help somebody. And because folk hero could also mean, to me, it could also mean like, well, you're in it for the glory. Like you're some kind of glory hound. Or something.
Yeah, like seeing people seeing you slay a monster could be. Yeah.
And then like charlatan is just you lie to somebody successfully, or you pretend to be somebody else, and all these, and it is pretty useful as a role playing tool. I don't know. I'm kind of two minds though. I'm not the best with inspiration. I will admit. I do it fairly sparingly, I think, in our games. Although you get to those end of campaign stats, and I tell you the inspiration, everybody's like way lowballs me on this stuff. Every single campaign, like you did not give that much inspiration. And to me, I think
it's because as a player, you literally don't pay attention when the DM gives it to somebody else. Like you literally don't even hear. You don't even hear the words.
Like collectively.
It's just like it's like two people talking that have nothing to do with you, so you're not even really paying any attention to it.
I don't give a shit if that person got inspiration. Yeah. What do we think? I do think it's interesting that if one person, and this happened obviously in our multiplayer game too, but if one person earns inspiration, but then anybody can actually use it.
I don't know about that.
I do that in my game. I let my players decide if they want to give their inspiration to another player.
for sure.
for a situation.
Oh,
Yeah.
for like a roll.
That's
Like if
that's different though, right? Because
That's different. So
Is it?
the person
That's
who has
consent.
it giving it.
Yeah, you have
Right.
consent to have to
But,
give
I
to
mean,
somebody versus like
As
literally
opposed to a pool.
a pool that
It's
anybody
the
can
same
draw
thing.
from.
In my opinion, as somebody being like, damn it, I failed. Do you think, like it's a negotiation, and I step back. I let them talk about it, and
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
okay. And everybody's mature enough. Like, no, I'm gonna hold on to it for
Right.
later or whatever. Everybody's mature there because it's the same process that's happening in Baldur's Gate. You're making the decision: do I want to take my chance for reroll,
Yeah.
or am I just going to accept the consequences for failing?
Yeah.
But there's just no negotiation at that point. And I mean, I guess you can negotiate with the team and be like, do I want to roll an inspiration here?
Yeah, like a person fails a hold person spell. Like they fail to save. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, I gotta fucking reroll that. I have a +6 on wisdom. I should not have failed that. Let me reroll. On a pool, as far as Baldur's Gate's concerned, you can blow through all 4, like right, one after another to make that save if you want to, without any discussion whatsoever.
But
That feels
as
a little
multiplayer game. When you're playing multiplayer and you've got 4 other people that are deciding it, and somebody's burned all 4 inspirations, there's a conversation that has to happen. There is a conversation. Yeah, it's like, well,
just let it
try
happen.
once before you consult somebody else.
Check really that important?
Which I think is a lot like a tabletop game, right?
True.
And so that's why in my game I let them swap inspiration back and forth to each other.
That's interesting.
Like it's a pool.
Yeah, no, I
why not?
That's something. So that's one half of it, and the other half is earning inspiration based on specifically doing things tied to that character's background. But I would also argue that what if your background was something, but then you specifically, I don't know what a good example of this would be in Baldur's Gate, but you you wanted to turn away, like you were a criminal in your background, but you were like, oh no, I don't want to be a criminal anymore.
That's
like
I
want
a conversation with your DM. Your DM rewards
change that list. Yeah.
Then you can change what you earn inspiration from. And you're
Suddenly
like, all right,
your background is reformed criminal, and you have a different set of conditions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Or maybe things even evolve in the game where you change it. And you're like, okay, now I want to have these things trigger it. It's something I would be amenable to. I do like giving out inspiration.
It's still something DM has to pay attention to, though. It's still something that DM has to actively.
But I feel like
they're hitting those notes.
Yeah, I feel like if you went over it in like a session 0 and you had those bullet point lists and you went over it with each player individually, like, all right, here's the kind of things that will earn you inspiration. And then you, the DM, would also have to keep track of, have a sticky note or something where it would say each character is this thing, and that would be something relevant to them.
Here's how I think that's super helpful, because that gets to what I think was our group's favorite part of the Alien RPG, was that giving you guys straight up goals, like secret goals, like your character likes this and doesn't like that. That was able to guide the role playing in a certain way.
Yeah.
The problem is Eric played all the characters who were like, "What's going on?"
I had all the just
that is
oblivious.
a problem. Yeah, what's happening?
I'm the worst example of that one, but yeah.
but to our example, the like backgrounds as initiative, I feel like that would really go a long way in encouraging role play from those backgrounds.
I make a suggestion that I've thought of with my players, and I haven't brought it up, is to let your players be the ones who advocate for it.
Yes. Yep.
Like, I'm doing this because my character's flaw is X. To remind you.
Yep.
Right.
Because you're not trying to be combative with your characters and say, no, you can't do that. If it fits within the game and your character, then it helps the DM. Because the responsibility of the game and the narrative should be on your characters as much as you.
That's exactly what I tell my players is like, hey, if you have a certain expectation of something, remind me, because it's not that I'm not paying attention to you, but I'm also A, reading ahead, B, double checking a stat block, C, making sure that I remembered that fucking resistance that this monster had.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, there's a lot of things where, I think the burden, and I
think that's totally valid to have the player be like, hey, DM, I think that what I just did hit one of my bullet points.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. And we're still, if we're doing this, we're still limiting. Are we limiting each person to 1 inspiration, or are you just limiting a pool to 4 inspiration? So somebody could technically earn inspiration 2 or 3 times in a session, or are we still limiting to 1 person?
You can only hold 1.
And do they expire at the end of the session? And do they expire at the end of the session like they're supposed to?
Well, we don't play long enough sessions. I
On
feel
top
like
of that.
in
Nobody
a
does that,
general
but-
sense, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like that is how they're supposed to expire.
If
but,
they expire, then I feel like you would have to give up more inspiration.
right.
Yeah.
And I don't remember
Well,
enough for
they
that.
keep
myself.
forgetting to use them as the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I would. Occasionally, you will hear me as a DM. If somebody fails a really bad roll, I'll be like, "Do you have inspiration?" Usually, it's the other
Right,
players.
yeah,
Like, "Do you have some
exactly.
inspiration you would
That's-
use?"
That's me playing Alien or like Cult of Cthulhu. I'm like,
Yeah.
you want to push? Do you want to
Yeah.
push? Like,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I want them to push.
But that
I
would
want
be-
this to be a.
That's
I
making
want it to be a
It's a
shitstorm.
very good idea for you to push.
That's making me
Yeah.
want to do the thing where players can negotiate and give each other the inspiration, because then it's
Yeah.
less having to like, oh, DM, I wish you would give me more inspiration, to like, oh, hey, I really need to make this save. Can you
Anybody out
help
there?
a buddy out here?
And that's the thing. If somebody offers to give it away, then you can kind of get it back at some point, potentially.
True.
But yeah,
You-
I still think
Could
As
you
a
only
narrative.
could you
the
only
one per
give
person thing is still, I think that's still a lock, because yeah, the whole like one person get inspiration 3 times, now there's 3 points in the pool. I don't know. That seems
because that's what can happen in
Weird.
Baldur's Gate technically.
It
Although I
can.
think they
It can.
spread that stuff out where it doesn't really come up too
Happen as
often.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, where there's multiple chances to be a folk hero in this one area like that. I haven't looked obviously behind the curtain for the game design or anything, but I think I generally they spread that out to where it's probably not going to happen.
right.
But yeah, it's just a communal pool that you can draw from. It's very I think it's very interesting. I don't think Solasta has inspiration at all. Is that correct?
I don't remember that being a part of it.
I don't either, because I think
I don't,
they
I
just
don't
said, well,
remember
that's
it
a
being
DM
like,
thing.
stuck
So
out enough to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah. So I think Baldur's Gate solution was actually pretty cool that they included it in an interesting way, and I'm tempted to make some changes based on how they use that.
I also think that system of like, okay, you get these bullet points from your background. I think it's a lot better than D&D's four box system. Their ideal
Traits,
bonds,
bond flaw,
traits,
yeah.
flaws. Whoever remembers that stuff? Like,
Yeah.
it's just
because you did it like 6 months ago.
you did 6 months ago. Yeah.
They're very specific. It's like I have a person I knew from like my youth, and it's like
Right, exactly.
not a behavioral thing. A lot of it's like historical based, and it's just not useful in the way
Right.
that you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we came up with, was it the 5 traits? I think was my
the 5 words.
the 5 words. It's like use 5 words to describe your character, and I think that's better. That's more useful to the player and to the
Personality,
DM.
for sure. Yep.
Yeah, than having to go
And
through
if
all
we
these
wanted to
different things.
ignore the background, you could just do it off the 5 words. Be like, okay, when you're hitting those as bullet points, that's when I'm going to give you advantage or inspiration.
Yeah. Which
That'd be another way to do it.
technically that's rules is written, I get, because you're using inspiration based on their good role playing of their character.
Sure.
But yeah, I think what we're saying is well, specifically tie it to the background and specifically give them, how many times can I use specific bullet points that are like, here are like folk hero always comes up where it's like you're saving somebody, right? You're rescuing somebody. I was like, oh well, you were an inspiration. And it took me a couple sessions in our game before I realized, like, oh, it's like literally doing specific things that the game triggers as certain things will earn inspiration because of that background that I chose. Which I didn't even put much thought into the background at the time because I didn't realize that was baked into the game like that. So now in like future characters, if I ever had any, I would think, oh shit, what do I want to have be triggered off inspiration?
Some of them are clearer than others. Like Folk Hero's very clear, Charlatan is very clear. I've only gotten Soldier once or twice, and the one time I can remember getting Soldier was because like you defended a gate and none of the neutral soldiers at that gate died. You were able to defend it without losing any NPCs, and that gave you as a soldier a point of inspiration. But I'm not sure what that list would be for a soldier outside of like.
So much of it is tied to because your main character is the one who is going to get the majority of the inspiration because it's tied so much to dialogue.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right, so if you're a charlatan bard, you are just loading up on that shit because every dialogue you can pull that off.
Yeah.
But it's not like if you're Lae'zel or something, you're going to take a lot of dialogue and get that.
I wonder if
ability to make that choice.
I wonder if we earn more inspiration in our multiplayer game because all 4 of us are spreading out, doing multiple things, interacting with multiple things, talking to everybody as people versus, in a single player game, you're generally going to be controlling your one avatar, going around, doing the things. You're probably not splitting up too often to just explore something or talk to people. So I wonder if maybe overall we might earn more inspiration as a multiplayer party. I don't know. All right.
A question. As a broad question, does anybody play Baldur's Gate 3 where their avatar is not the face of the party?
This was
because I feel like it's just
Yeah.
like almost like by default he's gonna they're gonna be whether they're charisma or not. I feel like you're just gonna by default end up having them be the face.
So
That's
there's
just
been a
because
handful
you
of times.
pick that character to be the first person to walk into a space.
Basically,
Yeah.
yeah.
If they're first in the line of the 4 on the left,
They
that
walk
person is
in?
the default conversation person.
Yeah.
Right.
There are
So I
sometimes
get it
that
accidentally sometimes, but
I
yes,
feel like
you're
the
right,
game
but-
gives you enough like heads up that you can like, okay, this is probably going to benefit if this person talks first.
Yeah.
That you can kind of do that, but I definitely am the face of my party.
Yeah. I mean, I'd played a sorcerer, so mine's just high charisma. So I just by default he talks to everybody. So it's not even a question.
I always play charisma characters because it's just the most fun.
Yeah.
Especially since you got Shadowheart just kind of like tapping your shoulder every time
Yeah,
you have a
exactly.
Get
conversation.
that guidance, but then
You
you
want me to
can't
do
have her
better
cast
at
that
that?
fucking Shield of
That
Faith.
is the most-
You get that. You
Only-
thinking I could cast Shield of Faith, but then guidance is gonna fuck that right up.
Guys only lasts for 10 rounds and it's gone. But you'll use it that conversation, so it's gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, that's something that should be added to D&D is just that guidance with everything.
Yeah, guidance should be yeah. In terms of things that come from BG3 into the game, guidance should be like a reaction. In the tabletop game, it should be like
because
someone
people are strict about like,
rolls-
well, you gotta cast guidance
you
before.
didn't say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas
It should be like no, I'm going to roll it on every single like
Yeah.
conversation that everyone has, every persuasion check that everyone does. You can assume that I'm casting guidance.
that's another
And I
thing
think
where I'm kind of glad that they don't. It feels like they're respecting my time because I'd be like, oh shit,
Yes.
this is a really important
Exit
check.
out.
I'm gonna load
Cast
I'm gonna load my whole fucking game again because I can't get out of this conversation, and I'm gonna make sure to cast guidance, and now I'm gonna get in there. And the designers are like, you know what? You can just fucking cast guidance at that moment that you would need to cast it. Don't worry about it. I'm like, thank you. Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
Also, how broken is friends?
Totally broken.
Yeah.
There's no negative effect.
There's no negative effects. It just works.
Instant advantage.
It says
All
does
the time.
say that on more difficult levels. I'm playing my
see that.
Oh, I
multiplayer
actually had it
game
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
as tactician.
You have to be at the
and-
third level though.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I have been playing as tactician, but I still haven't come across a consequence yet.
Yeah, I play regular. It's never been a thing. I think that's
Yeah.
just a tactician thing. You're correct.
I'm kind of okay with giving people Jedi mind trick, like just.
It's
Every
and
conversation.
I actually, Eric, I think you accidentally did it.
I mean, guidance can give you a D4 every conversation. That's almost
Yeah.
advantage, isn't it? Like, isn't it a
Yeah.
+5 advantage?
advantage is like +3 to +6, depending on
Yeah.
how hard the roll.
So
It's
now
not
the
quite
problem
as
is you can stack.
especially-
Now what you
quite as
can do is
significant.
stack friends and guidance, and then it becomes like
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I've done that.
I'm gonna
Yes.
auto win this one. Yeah.
There might be some happy medium because Friends goes from like almost OP in BG3 to borderline useless in the tabletop game.
Cannot use it in tabletop.
That's
games
true,
Because
Yeah.
cannot use it.
unless you intend. The only use for the tabletop game is if you literally intend to kill the person you're about to talk to. Like I'm going to convince them to come into this room with me, and then I'm going to murder them, and that's the use case.
You know,
It's gonna be
we
pissed at me anyway.
Which is why it's a cantrip.
we just
Exactly.
we just had this recently. This spell was recently cast in a tabletop game, and I'm thinking like, I would like to see friends used more often. So I don't think it would necessarily turn that person hostile and they would get all crazy about it. I mean, magic gets thrown around everywhere. It depends on the person, but maybe they don't even quite know. This is kind of house rule, I guess, exactly what happened. They just think maybe you magically charmed yourself or you had some kind of, influence about you. So they realize that maybe something had gone on, but also this is a adventure. Maybe they just have magic items on them. Like, I think there's wiggle room there, because I do think that Friends is useless as written in 5e.
It is.
So you kind of need to have some wiggle room for the DM. Now you could argue, well, then you need to cast like Charm Person or something to actually get that across. And there's a lot of tricky overlap between like the illusion
true,
spells,
yeah.
the charm spells in terms of what they can and can't do, and a lot of it's up to DM negotiation for the most part.
To be fair, when it says becomes hostile, that's this capital H hostile, as in that the category of, because D&D 5th Ed actually has like rules for
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
like
mean hostile,
conditions, like
people attack
neutral,
you.
friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they'll attack you. This means it puts them into that category that gives you disadvantage on further checks.
Okay.
I think.
I think that.
So it's a thing that no one knows.
Yeah.
Even I don't know. But when they say H, it means like will attack you. It means they're harder.
Because
They're
it's
harder to deal
harder
with
to
going
convince them of
forward.
Yeah.
things. Which that
Like,
may make more sense
maybe
than what
that
you're
makes
talking
friends
there.
better.
We're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we could go on and on about all the different spells. Like mirror image
Yes.
is way different. Like
Invisibility.
yeah.
Invisibility.
you were
kinda
just
sucks.
bitching about
Invisibility is terrible in this
Greater
game.
invisibility is
the
fucking
worst.
garbage.
Yes,
That's
yes,
weird.
yes, I agree completely. Terrible. Fucking waste of time.
Invisibility is also kind of not as powerful in fifth ed as everybody thinks it is.
Because
Which one?
technically
You don't
you're
know where people are.
yes.
right.
Yeah, you're still be able
So you can
to
see their breath and stuff.
correct. Yes. I think
Yeah.
there's I think including us, I think people play invisibility as an instant, oh, that person's gone, I can't target them, I can't do anything.
Invisible
Whereas
Man style.
yeah, whereas actually, like, you could probably, maybe like Predator invisibility, where like you know, they were just right there in front of you, like you can still
Yeah.
like hear them, you can, you know, have your senses about you. So I do agree with Jason. Like, we probably make invisibility, I know at my table, a little too
I do.
good.
Yeah.
And then Baldur's Gate, I think, looks at
but
that.
Baldur's Gate is not even. It doesn't even solve that problem. It is just straight worse.
Yeah.
Where like at greater visibility, just standing there, enemies get to make perception checks to see you,
Yeah.
and once they see you, it's over. The spell
Well,
ends.
Why did they make the choice that that's the problem? Like, here's where we're going to draw the line: is invisibility. But
Yeah.
yet you can make a dex-based monk that takes the the hill giant strength potion every morning,
Yeah.
and now you've got strength and
That's
dex
right.
put together.
Yeah.
Like,
But invisibility.
They were so
is
concerned about
yeah.
invisibility breaking the game, I guess.
and you can't
Yeah.
tell me that somebody there didn't say like, but if we do this and we let them do it, they're going to make this kind of build, and it's probably going to be cheesy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember Chris was talking about invisibility being a problem. I think we just fought an
I was
enemy
so
that was
excited.
like, oh, I can
I
just
was
perceive.
so excited to like twin greater invisibility, my two melee characters, and have them fucking out there just attacking people and no one saw them, and both of them lost it.
Yes.
One of them lost it the first turn, the other one lost it the second turn, and it just didn't help.
You know,
them at
the
all.
way I would have balanced that is to maybe it just be a timer where like, hey, great invisibility is super fucking good. It's just like non-targetable, makes you amazing. You can
And
do
it
an
lasts
attack, but it
3 turns or
lasts 2 or
something.
3 turns.
Yeah.
And that's
That,
and then it's
I'd
over.
be all right with that. Yeah.
Which some of the things do in
Yes.
There are some things that only
Well,
last
the-
couple
the-
times,
not
yeah.
a thing in fifth ed. Those like little round 2-3 round.
Yeah, and what reminds me of that is our very latest session where we had the wild magic thing go off, and I was like, holy shit, but then I saw in there, oh, they all last 2 turns, which was still devastatingly hilarious.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, oh, I gotta wait until the AI decides to hit me and then I can break out of it. Instead, it's like, oh well, worst case scenario, it'll end in 2 turns.
It'll end in 2 turns
And that's not something I would want to track in 5e at all. I would not want to track a timer like that, because like, holy shit, that would be just another thing. I can't even imagine trying to track
Different countdowns on each character.
countdowns.
of,
You gotta be kidding me. But
yeah.
in the video game, absolutely add little. You know, if you want to rebalance things, then add little cooldown timer, or just a timer on all these kind of like even if visibility. You know, maybe you can use it out of combat for however long, but once you're in combat, maybe it suddenly starts a timer, and that represents like enemies sensing you as you're moving around the battlefield or something. Call me up,
Yeah.
Larian. I got some thoughts.
Yeah.
What I know we're trying to finish
Let's
this up
look in
in
Belgium
Belgium
right now.
the are any of the spells based on short rest recoveries? Because like that would be one of the ways that I think you could fix it, is like have greater invisibility, but it only lasts until short rest, because then it's still tied to a resource. And if you choose to try to extend your short rest as long as you can, you're going to have another consequence at some point. But you know, it's probably
I don't think anything does.
warlocks,
Yeah.
right, and monks recover more things on short rest. So I wonder if maybe that's tied to that everybody would play warlock and monk at that point.
Yeah, it's that also speaks to greater D&D rebalancing, as I think, and I've made this argument before, every player character in 5e should have some cool thing that recharges on a short rest, and then also have stuff that recharges on long rest. I just think that's cool balance. I like the idea of a short rest. It helps kind of fix the rest problem, although I already ranted about the rest problem in general. But like the poor rogue has like nothing that recharges. Like the fighter has cool stuff that recharges.
Yeah.
The monk, the warlock, the druid gets wild shapes back. Even the cleric gets channel divinities back. But then you've got, you know, your main spell. Yeah, I guess you have arcane recovery is something, but I wish, I don't. Everybody needs short rest things that they get back to make short rest more interesting for all the different classes. But that's not even a Baldur's Gate problem technically.
Yeah,
I mean, they could have fixed it, I guess, but that's an overall 5th edition.
Baldur's Gate does add all those like things that those special kind of weird attacks.
That's
The
true.
weapon
Weapon
attack.
and stuff,
Don't
you
even
can
fucking
only use,
talk
like,
about
one.
the
We forgot about the
weapons.
weapon
Oh no!
We're gonna be talking till
I'm never gonna
2 a.m., folks. I'm very sorry. It's gonna
I
be
knew
a
this was.
4-hour
There's a lot
Brandon
of
was like,
changes.
I don't know if we have enough things to talk about. I was like, dude, we're gonna have a lot of things to talk about. The
I love
weapon
them.
attacks.
Yeah, the weapon attacks.
That's a
Short
neat
rest-
idea.
Short rest weapon attacks. Yeah.
I think that should be implemented into like house rules or the game. I do. I do think that that's a fun way for melee fighters
It is.
to be like, hey, I've got a way that I can kind of do something different, and it's available to anybody.
Pillars of Eternity
And
had
makes it different. It's weapons, which is a major fifth ed problem.
yes, yeah. The
Yeah.
weapons are just
All
interchangeable.
the same.
They're
Yeah,
all the same. Yeah.
Right.
They all just do
Pillars of
different
Eternity.
variations of dice. Yeah.
Pillars of Eternity had this exact same thing. They had weapons. Each weapon, if you were proficient in that, which Pillars was based more on older editions of D&D, so you didn't have like simpler martial weapons. You literally were proficient in like you were proficient in clubs or maces or spears. Like you had to take individual
Yeah.
weapon proficiencies. But if you did, and anybody could use any weapon. But then if you were proficient in that, or I don't know if they use the term proficient, but if you were trained in that weapon, then that unlocked that special attack that weapon could do. Now they didn't have the thing, I think, where it was a once per short rest thing. I think it was just, hey, you can always use this attack.
Mm.
So maybe it wasn't as powerful. But yeah, I love the weapon thing. That automatically means weapons have a more distinct flavor to them. It gives marshals, well, I guess everybody who uses the weapons, just more abilities. Some of them give you 2 or even 3 like abilities you can use. I've got like my
There's certain magic weapons that are all they are is like a plus
Is a
one with a special attack.
Yeah. It's a really neat thing, and yeah, it gives you all the fact that a magic item can unlock a completely new attack. You don't have to take the attack action; you take this other like action. Now that the item thing that kind of pulls in the fact that Jason was saying was like, well, now my items feel more stronger than my actual character build. But I do like those weapon abilities. I do think that adds a lot to it. That's something maybe we could bake into 5e that. Weapons matter. Individual weapons have different abilities. Hopefully there's a good way to balance that where the weapon attacks themselves aren't super powerful, but I do like the idea that maybe they go on a short rest recharge that adds another short rest element, and just it gives marshals some more options they can do. I think it's a great addition.
It saves
kind of
also
ties
from
with the first.
I would say it solves a little bit of the problem of like marshals being locked into certain weapons just because they're the right weapons.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like
my rogue has to use a rapier because that's the only fucking D8 finesse
It doesn't
weapon.
matter what the theme of my character is. I've got a rapier because it is the only D8 finesse light weapon.
Yeah.
Or like the great axe is the 2d6. I think is that one. So like every barbarian gotta be rocking a great axe because that is straight up just better than a great sword or a giant maul or whatever. So yeah, it solves some of that, I think.
Are we finally? Are we ready for closing thoughts? This is
somebody want to think of something else.
no. We've broken a record for longest DM roundtable ever. I try to usually clock these at about an hour. We're at 90 minutes right now.
That's about right.
I'm sorry. My fault.
It's all your fault, Jason. All right, we're gonna go around the room. Final thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3's changes in the rules versus 5e reverse order. Let's start with Chris.
Oh, broadly speaking, broadly speaking, I think most of the changes that Baldur's Gate 3 made are video game changes that work because it's a video game and not a tabletop game. And they're not changes that we could effectively bring into tabletop without introducing a shit ton of headache for the DM, honestly.
Yeah.
And for the players too. But there are, I think, a handful, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different changes that BG3 did make that I feel like you could probably pull into a game. It just makes the game better. Throwing potions.
Which I think I already implemented, yeah.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. So I think if you're looking at it from that perspective, you really got to just be mindful of what BG3 is able to do because BG3 tracks everything for you.
Yeah.
But once you're mindful of that, then you can sort of look at what things would work in your game and what things wouldn't work in your game.
Jason, final thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3's changes versus 5e?
I was going to say basically that, with the addition that a lot of things we've talked about are things that make player characters better, give them more options, and as a DM facing a system that's now 10 years old, which has constantly done that, made player and not helped DMs. I think as DMs, if as soon as you start implicating some things into your games, you're going to be up against the usual, like, how do I get this to my monsters? And that's where we get into those. You're having more fun making different kinds of goblins. Maybe you're, like using like Matt Colville's kind of like, Matt Colville has like those things for like different kinds, like skirmishers, blah, 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 and then you give your goblins different abilities to compensate,
Yeah.
which is more work for the DM.
Yeah.
As it gets more and more complicated, that's how it goes. But kind of might be more fun.
Yeah.
It's good inspiration.
I think there's a good compromise to be had. Monsters especially. I do wish a lot of monsters were a lot more interesting in the monster manual. I think when you're first starting out as a DM, you get excited looking at all these things, but then as you play the game more often and you see what all the players can do, and you see, I get that you don't want creatures to be too complicated, but there's a gulf of difference between running literally any creature and a spellcaster, to where I look at a spellcaster going, oh fuck. And any other monster, I'm like, oh, I wish I could do more things. There got to be, and I think they've slowly done that by, instead of giving even spell slots to monsters in newer games, now they just have like, hey, you can use this spell once per day. You can use this spell 3 times per day or something, which is like good, because I don't fucking track spell slots. Like, combat's usually not running that long. There's no good way for me to do that. And spells are just so many spells out there. Like there's gotta be a happy medium for there. And thankfully you can see a video game is unshackled from having a DM have to make all these decisions, and you can have some really cool ideas that maybe don't quite pan. You don't want to have a DM running an entire goblin party of adventurers against your player, unless it's a very specific rival party situation. Then that could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But just random enemies around the board, probably not so much. Brandon, final thoughts about Baldur's Gate 3 versus 5th edition rules?
It introduces a handful of things that I think can be implemented in a game without it totally breaking it. One of the ones that I don't think we talked about would be spell scroll use by any character. Any character can use a spell scroll if they have access to it. I'm not sure I necessarily see a consequence, but also my games don't have as many spell scrolls as Baldur's Gate does.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's up to you, the DM, to give that out. Yeah, as much or as little as you want. Yeah. That's a holdover from Divinity.
Too many spell scrolls. I'll say it. Too many spell scrolls. I've got inventory.
Once again, it hurts casters.
Yeah.
Makes casters less valuable.
Kind of does.
So,
yeah.
But I agree that.
Well, the DC is still tied to like your ability scores, so the caster is going to be more successful generally casting.
So is it always like, if you've got a fireball, it always checks? Like, what stat does it choose to check then? If you're a fighter,
I think it checks your intelligence. Still.
Yeah.
I think it straight up checks the spell.
But like, if it was a sorcerer, it'd be your charisma, right?
That's true. I don't know which. I don't know.
So that's my question: is like, what would it know?
It's checking one of them, but I don't know which one.
It's probably in this wiki somewhere that I haven't read.
Yeah. Somebody will comment and say this is how it works, but
one of the three. Intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Checking one of them for each spell.
I've been slowly implementing rules like that, where it's like, okay, more, because people weren't using scrolls a lot in my games, and I wasn't giving out scrolls very often, and I figure, well, this might be a way for people to use scrolls more if I start making it get out of those very strict rules of how, you got to make these checks to even try to use a scroll. You have to have it be, you have to already know, how the spell works in terms of your class and all that. Because I actually do kind of like the decoupled thing, but yeah, on the other hand, it could, if everybody can literally pick up any scroll and throw out those abilities, granted, you won't be quite as optimized at using that scroll, but it does make spellcasters a little less powerful. So
it's a bit of a hoarder game. I call it playing pawn shop. Also, I've got as many things as I possibly can.
Thematically, I just like to give scrolls to like the main spellcasters, and then to me that makes them more powerful, because it's like, here's extra spell slots, but only for this specific spell. Versus having everybody be able to use them.
But I think if you're a DM, that has experience with video games, because to be fair, Baldur's Gate 3 is a complicated video game
Yeah.
that is not immediately an easy onboard. There's a lot of stuff that's
Yeah.
happening in the background that if you aren't paying attention, it's going to be difficult to understand why it's happening.
Yeah.
But if you like video games and you like D&D, I think it's well worth your time to see how it might improve your game.
Yeah, I like
Oh
both
yeah,
of those things.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a monumental triumph of game design married with effective use of the budget in every way. Like, just the voice acting's incredible, the level design, the art design, the story is very compelling. A great way to tell a story is immediately force your characters to be involved in the story because of a big thing that happens to them. Like, that's like the biggest player motivation you could probably, like, that's just not even mechanic stuff. That's just story stuff that the game is doing. Mechanically, it's very interesting. I feel like they went kind of what Jason was saying, like the domino effect, where they started changing things and then they had to change other things and then change other things and change other things based on how they wanted their version to work. Ultimately, gosh, if I'm playing a video game, I still really like Divinity's system more than D&D's. I know that's kind of blasphemous because we play D&D and obviously there's a whole D&D channel and stuff, but I think as a video game, having all my abilities out in front of me for every battle and just based on cooldowns and action points and not worrying about having to do the rest system is very cool. That being said, I think the changes they make have been very interesting. I wouldn't necessarily like a lot of those changes, and we've also mentioned a lot of these are video game changes, but you can also play Solasta and see that you don't have to really make any changes, and 5e kind of works as a video game also. I know a lot of people out there would probably love to see Solasta with its very faithful, that's what I'm thinking of, rules adaptation with Baldur's Gate's huge production values and storytelling and voice acting and art design and world level building. Like, all of that would be really amazing. That's not to say I don't enjoy Baldur's Gate 3's changes. I think they make a lot of cool stuff. But I know a lot of people say, well, wait, 5th edition like does actually work pretty well, translated into a video game. And I would agree with that. So it's tough. I think as a veteran 5e player now going into Baldur's Gate 3, it's helpful in a way to know a lot of how things work, but also was confusing in a lot of ways where things didn't work like how we thought they worked, and you can see a lot of that confusion in our own Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough, as I shamelessly plug it for the millionth time. Yeah, the top 3 for me that I would implement in 5e, I think we all mentioned, would be throwing healing potions around. I think it's funny. I think it works out really well, solves a healing problem, makes potions that much more useful. Of course, balance it out with the action economy as well. Weapon attacks is just a really cool thing that unlocks new abilities for marshals and makes different weapons mean different things, and even putting them on the short rest cooldown is a cool thing to do, I think. And then the way inspiration works in Baldur's Gate 3 is actually inspiring in a lot of ways. The way it actually enhances the backgrounds and uses them in directly tied to giving you inspiration, the fact that it gives a pool, and just, all of that is very fascinating. I don't know if I would necessarily use any of those things exactly as they're done in Baldur's Gate 3, but, as DMs, we are also used to just modifying everything as we see fit. All right, I think that is going to do it for this extra supersized episode of the DM Roundtable. Thank you so much for Brandon, Jason, and Chris for all your extra time. And, of course, thank you to all the patrons for allowing these to happen. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Core 1337, Big Nut, John F, John L, Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake, Counselor, Andrew, Gerald, the Reldrin, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, and Jason, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Carolyn, Jerry, and Thomas. Thank you all very much for your support. I hope to see you all for next month's DM Roundtable discussion.
Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. It's a good game.